Welcome to the Advanced Relationship Mindset Podcast. My name is Jenny Morrow, and I am the host of this podcast. And you might notice that I have tweaked the name of this podcast just a little bit. So I want everyone to remember that that's really the goal of this podcast specifically, is how do I give you teachings and information that can help you to advance the way that you understand and perceive relationships. So really, how do you create a more advanced relationship mindset that can be aligned with the type of relationships that you're wanting to create? So this podcast is really all for people who are wanting to be able to create what I call advanced relationships. And that is relationships that go beyond the traditional relationships of levels 1 through 3. So I talk all about the hierarchy of relationship needs, the 6 levels of relation, the 5 levels of relationship needs. I was trying to count. And that's a chart that Bryce put together. And then I went ahead and wrote about it, and we've talked a lot about it in this podcast. And so if you're interested in learning more about those levels, I dive into them in depth in the book, Mastering Boundaries, which you can get on Amazon. If you just search it under my name, it should pop up. And podcast is really all about helping you to create relationships that go beyond level 3. Traditional relationships are relationships that are capped at level 3, and advanced relationships can go beyond that into levels 4 and 5. So welcome everyone, and I'm so glad that you're here. And today we're going to be talking about who is responsible for your emotional safety. So I actually did a little Instagram reel on this last week and just posted it today. But I want to go ahead and read that, and then we're going to be breaking that quote down in today's episode. And if you want to follow me on Instagram to start getting the quotes and reels that I'll be posting from time to time, go to @JennyMorrowTherapy. Okay, so I'm going to read this quote and then we will dive into it. At the end of the day, there is one person that is responsible for your emotional safety. This doesn't mean you can't desire for others to care about you and love it when they do. What it does mean is that if you are asking for others to care about your emotional safety more than you care for it, if you are asking them to be responsible when you're not willing to set boundaries and take 100% responsibility, you may find yourself continually wondering why no one seems to care. At the level of safety, you get to make your boundary decisions unilaterally without anyone's permission. Okay, so let's dive in and talk a little bit more about this, because I see a lot of quotes coming from both the influencers and the relationship professionals I follow, coming from both sides of this. And I want to dive in and talk a little bit more about it and how I view it. When I'm thinking about safety layers, I'm really thinking about the base 2 layers of the hierarchy of relationship needs, and they are our foundation upon which everything else gets to be built relationally. And it's my perspective that at the core, each of us are individually responsible for our own safety layers in relationship. This doesn't mean that we always have power or control to make sure that no one causes us harm. In the United States, we have certain laws and rules that can help support safety development, especially in the physical safety layer. Those laws and rules and systems that support them aren't always perfect. Things slip through the cracks and people still get harmed without there being any repercussion or without there being any movement to resolve those safety issues. So safety issues can happen and there can be harm that's caused, and we don't always have control over that. So when I say that you're 100% responsible for your own emotional safety, I don't mean that nobody is ever going to harm you or hurt you. What I do mean is that you get to choose who you develop with relationally beyond the bottom layers of safety. And if you're making choices to engage in higher levels of relationship development with people who show that they are not able or capable of or available to help attune to your safety and to respect your safety needs and to respect your boundaries for safety, if you're making choices to engage in higher levels of relationship development with people who don't do relational safety, emotional safety with you, then again, you might end up in a situation where you wonder, why do all the people in my life not really care for my emotional safety? And it's tricky because you might have been conditioned or taught or modeled to choose people to make relational decisions about who you're going to let into your life without really knowing how to assess your own emotional safety desires, how to assess your own emotional safety needs, and how to create boundaries that really revolve around your emotional safety desires and needs. So I really do believe it is every individual's responsibility in terms of how they choose to engage with other people and build and grow relationships. It's really up to them, each individual, to determine your own emotional needs and to create boundaries that support the fulfillment of emotional safety. Now, once you get up into the higher levels of relationship development, there can be a very, very high dependency that we have on another person. So I like to use the metaphor of figure skating because figure skating really takes us into a more advanced movement process, for example. So if someone wants to advance their movement and their body's ability to do things, then they'll pick a practice, they'll pick a sport. And so someone might choose figure skating, for example. So you can do individual figure skating or you can do partner figure skating. Now, if you want to do partner figure skating, it's sort of two things. You do still have to learn how to individually figure skate. So you can't bypass that or skip that. You still have to learn how to do it as an individual. And then once you know how to do it as an individual, you can integrate that process with another person. Now, for a figure skating partner pair, they are very, very dependent on the other to create the movements, to engage in and excel at the routine, and to perform. So it's important to understand that when you do get up into the higher levels of movement development, it's the same thing with relationship development. When you get up into the higher levels of relationship development, you become highly dependent on the other person when you're doing that in partnership. So when you're doing the higher levels of relationship development in partnership, you become highly dependent on one another emotionally. And it's really important, A, that you know how to do advanced relationship development yourselves. Each person has to know that and understand that individually. Then when you come together, you're able to blend individual work and partner work together. If you have chosen a quote figure skating partner and that partner is always dropping you and you're at risk in terms of your own safety, my guess is you would say, I cannot skate with you. It is not safe to do that. And it's really like that in advanced relationship work. If you're in a relationship with someone who simply cannot do the moves in a safe way, and they continue to emotionally drop you, then that's a good indicator that they don't know how to keep you emotionally safe. And so in that case, you yourself are 100% responsible to say, I want to back it up here and we need to learn how to do this together safely. And that might mean that you need to learn some things that you don't know. And we need to learn how to do this together safely, or I'm not dancing, I'm not skating, I'm not going to do that together relationally. Now, a lot of people in our culture choose relationships that are more traditional relationships and in which you don't necessarily need the same level of safety support as you do at the lower levels. That doesn't mean that emotional safety doesn't matter. It just means that the more layers of relationship development you add, the heavier the upper part of the pyramid or the hierarchy becomes, and the stronger that those lower levels need to be. So the safety levels need to be stronger if you want to have a relationship that can go up to level 4 or 5. If you want a relationship that can go up to level 3, the safety layers need to be strong enough, but they don't need to be as strong as they do if you're wanting to go up into level 4. Now, again, if you're like, what is Jenny talking about? Please go get the book. Maybe I'll sometimes say this will be like the textbook for what we're talking about in this podcast, because I want you to understand the levels, and I'm not going to be diving into that in these episodes because I want you to go and get the book. This goes into so many more details, and then we can talk about how does it fit into specific things that we're talking about. And Bryce is not here on this episode with me today, so you might have seen that he and I have done a lot of the more recent episodes together. Well, we actually haven't done an episode for a while, so there's that. And then a lot of the ones we've done in the last year or last 2 years we've done together. So what we've decided to do is we've kind of separated out, okay, what do each of us want to be in charge of? And what are each of us most interested in right now? And I've kind of taken on the podcast, like, okay, I really want to engage more in the podcast. And so Bryce might sometimes join me for discussions or topics. But he's also got some other projects that he's really interested in working on. So we're also kind of modeling this opportunity to still work together, because we see all of our couples together, the two of us with our couples. And so much of what we do with people is also individual work. So I would say, and actually it's probably half and half. We do about half of our work with couples. We do about half of our work with individuals. When we see individuals, Bryce sees his own clients and I see my own clients. And so again, this is so important, right? We all have to learn to quote figure skate. We all have to learn how to do advanced relationship work individually to then even be able to come into partnership and do it together. So that's one thing Bryce and I have kind of been thinking about, is how do we support people? Because a lot of people come to us individually, especially in terms of our podcast and our social media things that we put out into the world. People are kind of doing their own educational work. We do get a lot of couples who find us, but that's more people who are looking specifically for couples work, couples coaching, couples counseling, something like that. Then people will often reach out to us if they find us that way. But in terms of what we put out into the world, it's often individuals that are listening to us. Most people who listen to our podcast aren't sitting down with their partner and listening. So it is helpful for us to be able to talk to you in terms of your own process. And then again, when you start to do that and your partner starts to do it, then you can integrate together a little bit more. And that doesn't mean that they necessarily have to follow our process or our way. But again, if you want to do advanced relationship work, you have to have a practice, just like you have to have some kind of a sport or some kind of a model for advanced body movement work. It's just so similar. There has to be some framework in which you're practicing increasing your flexibility and your strength to form certain moves or movements. Very much the same in relational work. Okay, so that's a lot of information, but it feels really fun to be back. It feels good to be here. I'm excited to be diving into more topics and just keep working on expanding your advanced relationship mindset. A couple of other things: you might be listening to this on the podcast, which is the Advanced Relationship Mindset podcast on all major podcast players. And then you might also be watching this on YouTube, because I'm going to be uploading the video recording. If you're interested in watching the video, then you can go to YouTube. And right now, the channel is currently named Jenny Morrow Therapy. So you can find me at Jenny Morrow Therapy on YouTube or on Instagram or on TikTok. So those are the three places I will sometimes post little clips from these episodes and things like that. But if you're here on the podcast and you're listening to the whole episode, I mean, that's ideal. So most of the time we don't go to social media to be educated. We go to social media to be entertained, and that has its place, and it can be enjoyable and relaxing to do that sometimes. But sometimes we spend a lot of time on social media being entertained, and we really miss opportunities to go in more deeply to educational processes. So that's one of the benefits of the podcast and some of these longer form lessons, is you get a chance to dive in more deeply with me as I explore these ideas around advanced relationship mindset. Now, if you are interested in continuing beyond just the podcast or clips and things that I might put out on social media, then I have some really exciting news, because I am getting ready to start the Advanced Relationship Community. And that is going to be a monthly membership where you can come in, and I'm going to host a women's group, and I'm going to host some Q&A calls each month where I will answer questions of both genders around advanced relationship development. And again, if you're a woman, then you get a little bit extra for being in the advanced relationship community, because you'll get access to some women's groups calls each month as well. So the best way to find out about that is to join the newsletter. Go to www.jennymorrow.com/newsletter and sign up. And that's going to put you on the mailing list. And as soon as the opportunity to join that goes live, you're going to get notified about that. And you'll also get details that way. And if you're on the newsletter, then you'll also be notified when I put out a new podcast episode. So generally, I like to send out a newsletter to those that are on that list anywhere from 1 to 4 times a month. Sometimes a few months goes by when things get really busy and I haven't been podcasting as much. So just know that, sometimes more time will go by. But if you want to know what's going on and you want to be notified whenever there's a new episode, where you can just click the link and go to the YouTube page, all of that's right there in the newsletter. It just makes it really easy if you want to stay connected to some opportunities to just continue learning and growing. So if you're interested in the newsletter, go check that out. So I'm really excited about this, and that's going to be launching in October, so in about 1 month. Okay, so that's some details of what's been going on. And I want to just come back around one more time and answer this question: who is responsible for your emotional safety? At the core, you are responsible. That means you make choices about who you engage with at higher levels. If they show evidence that they are not able to do higher levels of relationship development in a safe way, you've got to be the one to set boundaries and say, hey, we've got to go back in time. We've got to rewind a little bit here in terms of our pacing, and we need to do some safety work. We need to get someone on board with us. Either we need to go get education around it, we need to go get coaching, we need to go get therapy, something to help us to create the safety layers so that then, yes, we can dive deeper into some of these more advanced moves with each other. If that person's not willing to do that or not able to do that, and they are showing evidence of their inability to be an emotionally safe person for you, then again, you need to be the one to make the decisions around what boundaries you have. It could either be that you say, I don't do higher levels of relationship development with my partner, right? I have a partner and we do a more traditional relationship. And for that, maybe you don't need a higher level of emotional safety. Maybe what you've got is enough, and you get other higher level needs met from yourself because you're doing that emotional development, that relational development with yourself and or with friends, and that might be satisfying. And then you have a partner that's there for other reasons in your life, and that just might be enough. If it's not enough, right? If you're like, geez, I can experience more advanced relational moves and experiences with myself and with my friends, but I can't do that with my partner, and I'm starting to feel resentful, or I'm starting to not want to be in this relationship, then again, you have to be able to make those decisions and set those boundaries, because it might be that you're like, I don't want to do a relationship with someone I can't touch into those higher levels with. No one can make that call but you. You have to be the one that decides that. Now, if you don't even have enough emotional safety to do level 3, which is a more traditional relationship, or level 2, which is emotional safety in general, if you don't even have that much respect, again, you're the one that has to set those boundaries. You're the one that has to determine, I want more, and I have to set the boundaries for that. And so it can be kind of tricky, because ultimately you are responsible for deciding what you want and need and setting those boundaries. But once you do decide to dance with someone and they decide to dance with you relationally and to do higher levels of relationship development together, then you are highly dependent on another person for your safety. So I'm not saying that they are responsible for it. Technically, I mean, in a way they are, if they are being careless with you. But again, you're the only one that can say no to that. You're the only one that can say, I don't do the dance. I don't do the advanced relationship with dance with someone who cannot maintain and meet my needs for safety. It would be reckless and careless of me to do that. You're the only one that can make that decision, and you're the only one that can set those boundaries. Once that person decides to dance with you and they commit to caring about your safety as much as you care for your own safety, then together you become co-responsible for yourselves and for each other, and you make that choice. And so that is also a part of the reality when you're doing advanced relationship development, is you choose people who will care about your emotional safety at least as much as you do, and vice versa. And you co-care together about your emotional safety individually and relationally. If you have any questions on this, or if you have any topics or questions that you want me to answer in this podcast, send me an email at jenny@jennymorrow.com and just put podcast question in the subject line. And I will also be answering questions on this podcast as well. I look forward to continuing to connect and dive into these topics and explore advanced relationship mindset. Take care.